Hello and welcome to Michael's Minty Music for today. Today we review Coldplay's 2021 album, Music of the Spheres, Volume 1, From Earth with Love. It is really good. This is the track listing, and these are the tracks I added to my playlist, 8 out of 12, so 75%. This album is definitely really good. Most of the songs are pretty good, and there's a lot of interesting stuff here. Weirdly enough, this album feels very Pink Floyd-ish, even though Coldplay and Pink Floyd come from kind of very different places musically. This album kind of sounds like a continuation of some of the stuff off of sort of Division Bell or sort of late Pink Floyd stuff. It works pretty well as a concept album because there's not kind of an obvious story, so it relies more on sort of the spacey theming to combine sort of pop stuff with more modern production, techno, psychedelic stuff. It flows pretty well, although most of the in-between tracks kind of fall short. That opening, nothing special. Alien Choir, nothing special. And then Music of the Spheres 2 is not really anything. It's not quite on the level of Pink Floyd in that regards to concept albums, but it's still a pretty good sort of imitation homage. Plus, the quality is very consistent. There's at least one big hit here, which helps a lot. That last track, Coloratura, it's very interesting. You don't see a lot of bands doing long tracks like that anymore, and it's nice to hear when it's done well like this. Maroon 5 did something similar on their 2017 album Red Pill Blues with their song Closure, but definitely was not as good as this one. So, definitely a solid album here. There isn't really a lot here that's bad. Which is really good to hear. There were 2 singles released before the album, Higher Power and My Universe. That last one was a collaboration with BTS on there that was a big hit and was all over the radio at the time. Definitely one of the better tracks here, definitely one of the sort of hit tracks here. I think my favorite, though, probably got to go with that 7th track, People of the Pride. They trade in their pop style for more hard rock on this one, and it's quite good. It also really helps the flow of the album, kind of halfway in between. They successfully transition from the slow pop of the first half, especially with that Human Heart song, into the slightly more upbeat electronic style of the back half, which of course is built around My Universe. I rank this album 4th out of the 9 Coldplay albums I've heard so far, so this is officially in the upper half. This album is definitely a better concept album than Milo Exloto. That album, it's too connected to the story, so it feels like you aren't really getting it unless you specifically go and read what the plot is. While Music of the Spheres does have some of the story going on, the theme of the album manages to kind of transcend that plot. So you don't need to follow a specific sort of story to follow the whole album as a concept. Still think Head Full of Dreams manages to beat it out, though. That album has some bigger hits on it and comes together quite nicely as well. Coldplay is an interesting album where their singles end up dominating a lot of their sort of not as great albums, but they've still got a couple of albums where the album as a whole comes together really well without the singles. I think Music of the Spheres is definitely in that second category. Kind of their top couple of albums are all really good even without those big hit songs, but their bottom albums are mostly more of the like mid without stuff like Yellow and Speed of Sound. But this album is definitely worth checking out. However, it doesn't take my top spot from 2021. That stays with Imagine Dragons' Mercury Act 1, which I think is really great. And although they do some interesting stuff on Music of the Spheres, Mercury just has a certain consistency, which beats out most other albums, in my opinion. I also like Imagine Dragons a lot, so that definitely contributes to this. So thank you for watching. Next up will be Coldplay's 2024 album, 2024 follow-up, actually, to Music of the Spheres Volume 1, which is called Music of the Spheres Volume 2, subtitled Moon Music this time. I'm interested to see if they're able to continue the theming kind of successfully. And there's a 3-year gap in between, so I'm curious to see how that sort of influences it. So stay tuned for that. And as always, stay minty.